Okay, let's talk about the respiratory system. And I do want to preface this video by saying I don't know why it's yellow. I can't figure it out. I don't care that much anymore. Okay, let's talk about the respiratory system. So when we talked about digestion, what we did is we followed a particle of food through the digestive system. So in this case, let's follow a particle of oxygen through the respiratory system. Okay, so when we breathe in, remember that when we breathe in, we're not doing what we think we're doing. We're not actually inflating our lungs on purpose. What we're doing is when we breathe in, we contract our diaphragm, okay? So our diaphragm, which is a combination of some weird words, dia, fra, and gm, is complicated. And this is the muscle that when contracted, that contracts to cause inhalation. So that is when we contract our diaphragm, when this squeezes, it causes our lungs to get sucked down a little bit. The bottom of our lungs kind of get sucked down, and they open up as a result, and it causes us to breathe in air, okay? So that diaphragm contraction causes our lungs to inflate. You can't do that without opening your mouth, okay? It doesn't work. You can't inhale without either opening your mouth or breathing through your nose. And so you can't contract this without also opening up one of these to allow air to come in. So that's that. Okay, so the first thing that happens when you're breathing is your diaphragm contracts, your lungs start to open, and then oxygen goes in either through your nasal cavity, which is all this, or your oral cavity, okay? So nasal cavity or oral cavity. Okay, so this is the nasal cavity, and this is the oral cavity. So which is to say the mouth is the oral cavity, or the nose, which is the nasal cavity. Okay, and so is there an advantage to doing one? Well, the oral cavity allows you to breathe in a whole lot more at once, so it's good when you're working out or something. The nasal cavity allows for more filtration, because the nose hairs will catch any debris coming through. You also, this allows the air to warm up before it gets to the lungs, which is better for many reasons, okay? Okay, so, yeah, we'll move on from there. Okay, so now we've gone through either the nasal or the oral cavity. Where do we go next? We hit the pharynx. Oh my gosh, the pharynx. We've talked about the pharynx. So the pharynx is that shared space. So this is the pharynx. This is the shared space with the digestive system. So it's not a big deal if you get a little bit of air in your esophagus, but the air really wants to go into the trachea, okay? So this is the trachea. So remember, the trachea is ringed in cartilage for your breathing pleasure. Okay, what that does is it keeps the trachea open because the trachea is very moist, so that there's reasons, we will talk about it. It's coated in mucus so that any other particles coming in can get caught by that mucus before they get into the really delicate lungs. Okay, so you know what it's like if you have a wet bag, like a wet plastic bag, and you get the sides stuck together, they stick together, and then it's really hard to open it again. You don't want that to ever happen with the trachea because you'll die in 3 minutes without oxygen. Okay, so to prevent that from ever happening, the trachea has these rings of cartilage that keep it open all the time. Okay, the esophagus isn't like that. When you swallow into the esophagus, you just get this bubble of food that then gets pushed down through peristalsis to the stomach, okay? But the trachea needs to stay open all the time. This is really annoying me that this is really yellow. Anyway. Okay, cool. What happens after you get to the trachea? The trachea just carries that air to the bronchus, okay? So each one of these, so here's our lungs. Okay, so the lungs contain the bronchus, the bronchioles, and then all the alveoli, sorry. Okay, so the trachea, so I'm going to write this kind of over here. So the trachea splits into the bronchus, either the left bronchus or the right bronchus. Okay, so that's this. These are the bronchi. Okay, bronchi is plural. Okay. And then the bronchus, each bronchus splits into a whole bunch of bronchioles. Okay, so each of these is a bronchiole. Okay, so that means that oxygen, you can have a whole lot of oxygen coming down through the trachea, and then that oxygen splits into either lung, and then it keeps splitting and splitting and splitting and splitting, and suddenly we have a whole lot more surface area than when we started, okay? So there's a whole lot more surface area once you get down to the alveoli, so let's first go back and say, okay, so this is the trachea, so our oxygen's come in through the nasal or the oral cavity, it's gone into the pharynx, and then it goes into the trachea, and then the trachea is going to split into the bronchus on either side, and then it's going to enter the lung, and then each bronchus starts to split into multiple bronchioles, so I'm just going to follow this one, okay, and then at the end of the bronchiole, you have alveoli. So it's too small to see here, but if you, you can't see, okay, you can kind of see that. But if you zoom in a bunch, okay, you'll see that the end of the bronchioles, so here is, this part is the bronchiole, okay, bronchiole. At the end of the bronchiole, you have alveoli, and that's this part, these bulby looking things. They kind of look like grapes or ravioli, I don't know, okay? Now, the point of the alveoli is you have a whole lot of surface area again, and on the outside, you have all these blood vessels, okay? So these blood vessels, again, lots and lots of surface area, allowing for lots of places for the interaction. That's the pulmonary vein, or the pulmonary capillary bed. Pulmonary capillary. Okay, so that then goes to heart, heart, okay? So that pulmonary capillary bed comes in without oxygen. It hangs out around the alveoli. When you breathe in, you take in a whole bunch of oxygen. Again, it goes through the nasal cavity or the oral cavity, through the pharynx, through the trachea, through the bronchus, through the bronchiole, finally getting to the alveoli. Okay, let's go down here. The alveoli now there's millions of alveoli. Each one has just a little bit of air in it. So there's just enough air so that it can start to interact with the pulmonary valves, the pulmonary capillary beds at a small enough amount that it can then start being taken up by the blood system. So again, the alveoli, if you just take all the alveoli we have and spread them out, it's almost half of a tennis court. That's how much surface area is involved. If you take all the small intestine we have and you spread it out, it's an entire tennis court, so that's crazy town. But so the more surface area, you get more absorption. You have more areas for absorption. Okay, so I like to think of this as a highway. So if you're trying to deliver pizza, or let's say you're trying to give your friend a pizza, whatever, and you're driving on the highway and they're driving on the other side of the highway from you, and you can't just throw the pizza at them. Everyone's moving way too fast. There's a bunch of people in the way. It's impossible. Okay, so, or a bunch of cars in the way. So what you do is you get off the highway by exiting, like if you exit through a bronchus. And then, let's say you're on like a busy surface street, and it's still too busy, so you exit again onto like a neighborhood street, and then maybe you go to their house, which is the alveoli at the very end. And then, it's slow, it's chill, you can hand them whatever you were going to give them. So in this case, you're handing over the oxygen, and then they're giving you back the blood system's giving you back the carbon dioxide, which then goes back out the bronchiole, out the bronchus, out the trachea, out the pharynx, and then out the mouth or the nose, okay? So that's the respiratory system. That's pretty much what you need to know. Make sure you can track that oxygen molecule and tell me how it gets in, what it does, where it interacts, before it gets to the bloodstream. Bye.